may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, so I am recording this on Monday, the day that our rookie draft guide was released. And I just want to give a massive shout out to the people who not only got the rookie draft guide over there on Patreon, but more importantly, the people that somehow finished it in a day. Now, I don't know if I am just an embarrassingly slow reader or something, but I was expecting us to at least have to wait 3 or 4 days until we got some solid feedback and criticism on what we could do to improve our next draft guide. But no, I mean, so many people just DM'd us the night that we released it saying, hey, I already finished it, which it's over 100 pages and it's kind of like a novel format. And they had some great things to say about it. So of course, that's going to make me feel great when I was a little bit nervous to release our first ever draft guide. So yeah, thank you guys. I really appreciate the feedback. And of course, if you have it and there's anything that you think I can do to improve on the next one, please let me know. And a quick side note, everybody over there on Patreon that got the rookie draft guide, you are also going to be getting our 2021 fantasy football redraft guide as well. But outside of that, that's it. Let's go through. Let's talk about some of these running backs that are going way too high in 2021 fantasy football drafts right now. Now, keep in mind, this is all redraft. This is 2021 production. We're not talking dynasty in this video. Of course, we make a dynasty fantasy football video every day on our other channel. But no, here we are going to be talking about 2021 production. This is still extremely valuable for everybody playing dynasty because we understand that 2021 production is going to change the value of those players going into 2022, as well as making a massive difference for those contending teams that are trying to win this year. But that's it. Let's bring up our first running back here, and let's talk about Leonard Fournette. Okay, so obviously Leonard Fournette isn't going that high in drafts right now, but pretty much with this entire Tampa Bay Buccaneers running back situation, I'm trying to avoid every player. Now, y'all know that every single season, when you can identify the running back from the crowded running back room that is going to break through as the starter, usually that player has the upside to go through and potentially win your league. But in the case of Tampa this year, I just don't see that happening. And there's a reason for this. It's because what you're trying to do when you're trying to identify those late round running backs that are in crowded situations that could potentially take that starting job is you are trying to find a running back that doesn't necessarily need to see every touch in his backfield. We talk about this all the time. I'm tired of talking about it at this point. But there are two main things you need at the running back position to be extremely valuable in fantasy. What you need is you need to get targets out of the backfield, and you also need to get goal line usage. So I understand a lot of people are going to look at Leonard Fournette. We know a running back that has been very effective in the passing game over the past 2 seasons now, and as well looking at his massive frame, and they're going, hey, Mason, Leonard Fournette fits that mold. He can do just that. It doesn't matter if Ronald Jones is going to be getting the carries between the 20s. Leonard Fournette can come through with some spike weeks. And I just simply don't see it. Honestly, there are a few things here that are making Leonard Fournette a complete stay-away player for me. And it's firstly, his price. I mean, he's going in the 8th round of fantasy drafts right now. I just can't get behind that given the fact that with the large sample that we have in 2020, I mean, Leonard Fournette was not a running back you could start in fantasy. I mean, he averaged about 7 carries a game, 3.5 targets. He averaged 46 total yards, and he only had 6 total touchdowns on the season. Now, the reason that you're seeing that bump up in price is because of his playoff stretch. Now, this is exactly why we were avoiding Raheem Mostert in drafts in 2020, and it's because people had that vividness bias of Leonard Fournette, aka Playoff Lenny, being a fantastic player in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers Super Bowl run during their playoff stretch. Now, if you go and look at what he did in the playoffs, there he averaged 16 carries a game. More importantly, 4.5 targets, 112 yards a game, and he scored 7 total touchdowns in only 4 games. So first thing is, guys, that touchdown rate is obviously unsustainable. If anybody thought that was going to be there again in 2021, he would be going way higher than this in fantasy drafts. But more importantly, what I want to focus in on is what the Tampa Bay Buccaneers did this offseason. And what they did is, yes, they re-signed Leonard Fournette, but they did not pay him some massive deal. I mean, they gave him just $3.2 million guaranteed. Now, if you look across the NFL, I mean, Kenyon Drake pretty much doubled this with his salary to sign as a backup running back in Las Vegas. And also what they did is they went out of their way to bring in Giovanni Bernard. And this is the one thing that I am looking at and saying, I do not want Leonard Fournette, because yes, Fournette is going to outtouch Bernard. No, I am not assuming Giovanni Bernard is going to be the starting running back in Tampa Bay. But what we are assuming is we're assuming Giovanni Bernard, a running back that has been fantastic in the passing game, not only with what he can do with just running routes and catching the ball out of the backfield, but what he can also do in pass protection. I think that there Giovanni Bernard's going to come in. Giovanni Bernard is going to be the main pass catching running back on this Tampa Bay Buccaneers team. If you look at what he has done over the past 4 years in his NFL career, I mean, he's averaged 3.7 targets last season, 2.7 targets the season before, 4 targets the season before that, and 3.75 targets 4 years ago on a per game basis. Now, if you look at the average of this is over 3.5 targets a game from Giovanni Bernard. They give him $1.2 million to come into Tampa Bay, and this is what's going to make me stay completely away from Ronald Jones, completely away from Leonard Fournette, because I do believe that Fournette can win the job to be the goal line running back for Tampa, which obviously has a decent amount of value. And if he did have the potential to beat out the combination of Ronald Jones and Keyshawn Vaughn to get the passing down usage, there, Leonard Fournette could be a high-end running back too in fantasy if he was getting every single valuable touch in this offense. But with Gio coming in, with the role that we know Ronald Jones is going to have, with Keyshawn Vaughn, who I know is most likely a long shot to get touches in 2021, but they did spend a 3rd-round pick on him last NFL draft, and they are kind of tied up for him over the next 2 or 3 years, and he's the only running back they're tied up to, so you'd imagine they, at the very minimum, want to see what they have on a per-game basis. I just don't see the volume ever being there for Leonard Fournette. What you would have to have is you would have to have Giovanni Bernard getting injured. And even if Bernard got injured, you have to then pray that they weren't going to use Keyshawn Vaughn in the receiving game. And then if you dodge that bullet, you're still sharing a backfield with Ronald Jones. So there's really no path for Leonard Fournette to reach that high-end running back 2 upside that he would have had if Giovanni Bernard did not sign. So yeah, I have no interest in drafting Fournette. He's a player that I think you're going to be very frustrated with if you try to start him on a week-to-week basis. Okay, so now our next player, I know we are going to get a ton of hate for bringing him up because he's been pumped up lately across Dynasty YouTube channels, but Damien Harris here. Now, it's kind of frustrating when we go through and we do our mock drafts and I pass on Damien Harris and nonstop. Everybody asks, Mason, draft Damien Harris. Draft Damien Harris. Why did you just pass on Damien Harris in the 6th round? You needed a running back. You needed a running back too. And I'm looking at Damien Harris and I'm going, guys, where is this hype coming from? It literally makes no sense at all. Now this right here, this channel, this guy was advocating drafting Damien Harris in 2020 fantasy drafts because in 2019, he had an injury-riddled rookie season, and we are looking at the profile coming out of Alabama. We are looking at the situation that you had in New England, and we are going, hey, in 2020, when you're getting Damien Harris with one of the last picks in your fantasy drafts, he's a running back that has the upside to step into a 3-down role for the New England Patriots. So when he was significantly cheaper last offseason, yes, we were willing to take the shot on Damien Harris. But now his price has risen to where he's a 7th round pick in a lot of these drafts. And a 7th round pick in that range, you can't just be taking someone that has a floor of being a low-end running back 3 and a high-end outcome of being a low-end running back 2. I mean, you have no upside here with Damien Harris. And why I'm saying this is the usage he had in New England in 2020. Now, like I said, I believed that he had the potential to be a 3-down guy. That's what you looked at with him in Alabama. I mean, at Alabama, he did play that 3-down role, but in 2020, I mean, he was pretty much just a plug and play for Sony Michel. What was so bad about his 2020 season is the fact that he averaged 0.5 receptions per game. He barely cracked half a reception a game in 2020. Now, that is simply not going to get it done unless you are a Derrick Henry type player. Derrick Henry even crushes that number. Unless you are a Nick Chubb, and Nick Chubb crushes that number as well. I mean, you have to be that truly special athlete. You have to be 90th percentile in your SPARQ score. You have to be a size-adjusted speed freak. And Damien Harris isn't that. Damien Harris has never been that. You can't project Damien Harris to be anything more than a low-end running back 2 at the very best. You are drafting someone near their ceiling. You look at what he did in 2020. He averaged 9.1 points per game. He was the running back 41 in points per game. He was a mid running back 3. And then you go through and you go, okay, so what happened when Sony Michel did not play? Because Damien Harris played a decent amount of games with no Sony Michel. Sony Michel, presumably the starting running back for the New England Patriots in 2020. So let's just focus in on when there was no Sony. Damien Harris was the full-on starter for this team. What happened then? Did he take the significant step up? Did he become a low-end running back too? Well, if you filter for the games that Damien Harris started with no Sony Michel active, he averaged 10.0 points per game. He finished as the running back 37. So I'm sorry, I misspoke earlier. He was a mid running back 4 with Sony Michel in the lineup, and he was a high-end running back 4 with no Sony Michel. So now you see this team go out and they bring in Stevenson from Oklahoma. You look at what both Damien Harris and Stevenson did in the receiving game, and you go, hey, Stevenson was a better college receiving running back than Damien Harris. So it's not like Harris has a clear path to get that role in 2021 either. So there's no upside here. I'm sorry to say it. I really don't see the hype and why he is up here being drafted in the 7th round of a lot of these drafts. Damien Harris is someone that, I mean, if you find yourself needing a running back in this range, I'm sorry, maybe you have to be reaching on him, but you shouldn't find yourself in that situation. You should be drafting a running back earlier that you feel confident with. That way you can be taking a tight end. You can be taking a wide receiver in the 7th round, because Damien Harris at that point is just a very low upside play. Okay, so now let's go through and let's pull up our next running back. And this is the running back we're going to get the most hate for. I already know this. Let's talk about James Robinson. Okay, so with James Robinson, right now, he has an ADP at the beginning of the 6th round. A lot of times you're seeing him go in the middle of the 5th. And if we zoom out and we look at James Robinson, I understand that he was a fantastic fantasy asset in 2020. He was the definition of a league-winning running back in 2020, where he averaged 17 carries a game, 4.3 targets, over 100 total yards a game, and he had 10 touchdowns in a total of 14 games. So he was a bell cow guy, so he was seeing almost every single carry out of his backfield. And because of that, he came through and he provided you a running back 1 finish in 2020. But the problem is, the reason he had that path is because Jacksonville really had no other running backs in that backfield. I mean, I actually bet into Raquel Armstead before the Leonard Fournette trade. Then Leonard Fournette gets traded. I'm jumping up and down with all the Raquel Armstead we have. I go, who the hell is this James Robinson guy? Robinson comes out and crushes, but he was going up against Raquel Armstead. He was going up against Devine Ozigbo. So if you look at how productive the overall offense was for Jacksonville on the ground, I mean, this was a team that only averaged 21 carries a game, 95 rushing yards a game, and they had 9 total rushing touchdowns on the season. So if you look at the per game percentage that James Robinson accounted for in this overall offense, he averaged over 80% of the carries for Jacksonville, over 80% of the rushing yards on a per game basis, and close to 80% of their rushing touchdowns. So what this means is James Robinson kind of capped out last year. James Robinson literally can only go down from Travis Etienne coming in. And if you naturally assume, if you just go through all of history and see the prospect Travis Etienne is with the boxes that he checks and how that translates into Travis Etienne being a 3-down running back as early as his rookie season, you understand that this is a horrible bet with James Robinson. Because best case scenario here with James Robinson, and I am talking best case scenario, is he splits his backfield 50-50. I mean, if an undrafted free agent running back can come out and he can beat out a 1st-round running back draft pick, split the backfield 50-50, what you're going to find is you're going to find James Robinson all of a sudden, just say he went from seeing 81% of the carries in Jacksonville. Just go, Mason, he's going to see the majority of the carries there. We've already heard just Urban Meyer talking about Travis Etienne, receiving down running back, Travis Etienne going to be a pass catcher. Just say James Robinson can handle 60% of the carries in this offense, which simply isn't going to happen. But let me amuse some people. Let's just go through the motions here. So if he can average 60% of the carries in this offense, what's he going to get you? 14 carries a game? 14 carries a game. And if he has no usage in the receiving game, it just say that receiving usage gets cut down to from 4.3 targets because he's the only running back there down to 1.2, because on this hypothesis, what you have is you have Travis Etienne being the full-time receiving down running back. You have James Robinson just being the in-between tackles grinder. So all of a sudden you have a running back seeing 14 carries a game, 1 target. That is literally nothing in fantasy. We're right back to Damien Harris. We're to a running back that it's like either touchdown or bust. You're not starting him. I mean, if you do not have any of the receiving down usage, you better be a Derrick Henry. You better be a Nick Chubb. You better be a running back that is elite with his size-adjusted athleticism and have a long track record and a very high pedigree if you're going to overcome all those obstacles. Well, James Robinson doesn't have that. He's an undrafted free agent running back who pretty much fell into a ridiculous amount of volume his rookie season. They drafted his replacement, and even if James Robinson can hold on to a decent amount of touches in this backfield, they're going to be the meaningless touches, the carries between the 20s, the stuff that does not equal a ton of fantasy value. I mean, I would rather draft Jamal Williams, just say 10 rounds after, and get a comparable running back, get someone that is going to be the between the tackles grinder on a bad offense while you have the receiving running back getting all the usage. So yeah, I think that's a perfect comparison with what you have. James Robinson all of a sudden is Jamal Williams. Travis Etienne is the Aaron Jones, the DeAndre Swift, the guy that's going to be getting the valuable touches in the offense. So yeah, James Robinson, if you spend a 5th round pick on him, I mean, I don't know what to say. Now, our last player, another low upside player in my opinion, Josh Jacobs, going in round 4 of draft still. And here with Jacobs, I understand it, only 23 years old, first round drafted running back. But if you go back and look at the prospect Josh Jacobs was, I mean, he was not a good prospect. Really, the only boxes he checked out of the 4 we look for is he had the size, he had the draft capital. I mean, he is essentially the slowest running back drafted in the first round over the past decade. And I know that he was sold to be an Alvin Kamara coming out of Alabama. I don't understand why the mainstream media was talking about Josh Jacobs and his pass catching ability, because if you look at his pass catching production at Alabama, oh my God, he was a horrendous pass catcher there. And you see this with his first 2 years in the NFL, where in 2019, his rookie season, yeah, he has a full-on workload. I mean, he averages close to 20 carries a game, but he's down there at 2 targets a game. And then if you also see in 2020, I mean, he bumps it up slightly, but he's up at 3 targets a game. This is someone that's getting no receiving down usage. And if you're going to hear that, you would naturally assume that there's a more than capable receiving running back in his backfield. Well, maybe you can make the argument that DeAndre Washington or Jalen Richard is that, but I don't think so. I mean, in 2019, the next 2 running backs on this depth chart, DeAndre Washington, Jalen Richard. In 2020, Devontae Booker, Jalen Richard. So if Jalen Richard was able to take touches away from Josh Jacobs, I think that you have to be extremely worried about what's going on in 2021, because so many people are overlooking the fact that this team decided to give Kenyon Drake $11 million guaranteed. $11 million guaranteed. James Conner got $1 million guaranteed. I mean, if you go through all the running backs this past free agency, let's go through the running backs in the order of the most money guaranteed at signing. You have Aaron Jones at $13 million. You have Kenyon Drake at $11 million. Next, you have Chris Carson all the way down at 5.5. Jamal Williams, 3.2. Leonard Fournette, 3.2. Mike Davis at 3. So this team went out of their way, paid a premium price to bring in Kenyon Drake, and they have already shown that they are willing to give a Jag backup running backs the usage in the receiving game over Josh Jacobs. Now they make the investment into Drake and clearly tell us that Josh Jacobs has no upside to be a 3-down guy. And like I said, if you're going to be a first or second down running back, and if you want to be productive in fantasy, you have 2 options: Derrick Henry or Nick Chubb. Now, I know that this is annoying me just talking about this over and over again, but I'm tired of these players that aren't having the receiving down capabilities being drafted in a range where they really don't have much upside. I mean, it's sad to say, but none of these players are Nick Chubb. None of them are Derrick Henry. Not James Robinson, not Josh Jacobs, not Damien Harris, not Leonard Fournette. They don't have that same talent. They're not going to be as effective in fantasy. I understand they're coming at a much cheaper price, but still, there's no upside to be had here if they don't have the receiving down usage. Target the receiving running backs in this offense. Instead of getting a Leonard Fournette, get Giovanni Bernard with your last pick. Instead of getting a James Robinson, just draft Travis Etienne. Instead of going through getting Josh Jacobs, wait 6 rounds, get Kenyon Drake. And instead of going and drafting someone like Damien Harris, just completely avoid the situation in New England or get Stevenson with one of your last picks. Now, thank you. I know that y'all probably really did not like this video, but I think it's something that we really need to talk about. You don't want to be drafting the running backs that are going to be getting the useless touches in the offense and paying a premium to do so. So please go down there, drop a like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. It helps us out a ton, and I'll see y'all with the video tomorrow. I really owe a massive thank you for all the Patreon supporters in Ben, Braden, Zach, Ryan, William, Derek, Justin, Marshall, Tyler, and Eamon. Thank you so much, guys.